This week, we are going to continue on with looking at relationships. We talked about falling in love and things along those lines, and now we're going to talk about kind of what happens next. So, the article reading this week is about heteronormativity and challenging the fact that our society oftentimes defaults to heteronormativity, right? That is male-female relationships, and that's not necessarily everybody's relationship. This week, we're also watching a real brief clip from the movie When Harry Met Sally. It's a rom-com. It's like the original kind of rom-com, I think 1989, maybe it came out. And Harry, who you'll see in the video clip we're watching for a different reason that I'll bring up later, um, has a theory early on in the movie that men and women can never be friends. And so I've used that as an activity before. We're not doing that right now, but I wanted to kind of get you thinking about this. I ask students that exact question, then, can men and women be friends? But think about the fact that that's really heteronormative, right? That's assuming that only men would be attracted to women and only women would be attracted to men. So really what the question's getting at, like what Harry's saying, is two people who are attracted to each other can't be friends. And so, again, kind of norms in relation to relationships and norms kind of in general in society, right? Norms are the standard typical stuff that we all have to do to fit in. I really like the term unwritten rules because you don't get a guidebook on how to act in society. But like think about what dating norms are. Like what are the things you're supposed to do? What are the things that you're like, you can't do that? For a myriad of reasons. And not the stuff that's like, no, it literally harms people, but the stuff that it's cringy words that we shouldn't use in sociology, but like what makes you, oh, that person's weird. What are the things that people like? They're fine, they're nice, whatever, but they're weird, they're strange, they're not normal. Like can you hear my voice? Because it's like I'm putting everything in like quotations, like these words that, well, I mean, maybe it's not peculiar to somebody else. Maybe it's a cultural norm or something along those lines that you're not picking up on. Whatever myriad of things it could possibly be. But as you can see as the title in this lecture, as I finally move on from this slide, cohabitation, living together, right, is kind of a norm in our society, right? Maybe as like an unofficial step in relationships getting more and more serious, possibly on their way to marriage or probably or something. And so we're going to dig into that in a second. But one of the things that you're doing this week for our discussion board is looking at a person's work. Her name's Laura Kipnis, and she wrote this book, Against Love, which is a polemic, as you can see. A polemic means a rant. This author destroys love and relationships in this book. So if you're like, ooh, that sounds interesting, by all means, dig in. I had to read this for my Politics of Sexualities class that I'm really, really lucky that I'm friends with the professor now. So I always will be like, oh my gosh, it's Against Love Day, because I utilize that like 7 or 8 pages of the list of Laura Kipnis's things you cannot do in a relationship. And so kind of the seriousness of living together, she takes it to task. And I want you to think about what are the things that you're like, she's totally right. You can't do this in a relationship. What are the things you're like, oh my gosh, she's totally wrong. You totally can do this in a relationship. We're going to be discussing that. And so I want you thinking about, I'm a big fan of you can't deny when the wrong tone of voice accusation is made. I would say that that is something that definitely happens in my relationship, that like the way you said it. So, as you can see, included a quote from the very end of the excerpt that I'm sharing with you this week. So, such commands, it should say may. I have a typo. Oh my gosh, it's going to bug me. You can judge me, whatever. Such commands may be acceded to voluntarily, or they may be negotiated settlements, or they may be the subject of ongoing friction. But you go along with them to make your partner happy, or maybe you pick your battles, but primarily you go along and they with you, because that's how to best preserve the couple. What matters is the operative word is can't. The fact that she writes a list over and over. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this. But think about what are the things that you're like, you know what? Yeah, they do this. It bugs me, but I love them. I'm gonna deal. It is what it is, right? We all have those things. But what are the things that are like ongoing friction? I will tell you one from my relationship. I am married to a morning person who runs like 100 miles a month. He's a runner. And so he gets up, and he's a junior high teacher. So he gets up at like 4 in the morning No exaggeration. Literally, the alarm goes off at 4. And like on weekdays, I don't know, he runs like, I don't know, 4 to 6 miles or something. I'm asleep. And then on the weekends, it's usually like somewhere between, I don't know, like 12 and 15, 16, 17 miles. Right now, he's going to be running a marathon in a couple weeks. So it's been longer runs of, like 23 miles. That means he needs to go to bed early, right? He needs sleep. But he unfortunately married somebody who's not great about going to bed early. And so if you're thinking about, or if you're listening to this right now, you're like, just go to bed. And or just have him go to bed and you go to bed later. But then I get kind of whiny and it's like sad to go to bed by myself, like, and he's already asleep. I'm very honest in this class about like all of my shortcomings. So that is one of them. That is ongoing friction in our relationship that is like negotiated. We're pretty good about it now. Like go to bed around 9:30, which is in like 14 minutes, um, and like try to be asleep by 10 o'clock. Or like he goes to sleep and I'm like cuddled in bed next to him reading for like the next hour, whatever. But I share that with you to kind of be an example of that like ongoing friction. We've been together for 27 years and it's still like the morning night person thing. We love each other dearly, but it kind of ends up being a thing with us. So thinking about kind of those serious steps in relationships, even if it's not like we all act like you all have to move in together, but a lot of people do. And I don't necessarily know if they spend an inordinate amount of time preparing and or thinking and or negotiating and or talking about it, right? So look at the definition of cohabitation, because I think it's quite something. A tentative, non-legal co-residential union. It does not require or imply a lifetime commitment to stay together. Can you imagine like saying something to someone about this? Would you like to enter into a tentative, non-legal co-residential union with me? It does not require or imply a lifetime commitment to stay together. I'm really, really fascinated. I think it would be an interesting research project if you could get people to be like honest. Like how many people move in together and then eventually, even if maybe the relationship isn't going as well as they'd hoped, they it's pretty darn good enough-ish that they stay in it and they go on and get married because it's too much to undo. Like the rent, the lease, the life, the shared everything. Like it's a big, big step and not necessarily always discussed. And so in this class, I hope you find it to be a valuable opportunity to take your academic skills, your critical thinking skills, and turn them on yourself. Do you believe in moving in together? Do you think, yeah, I think that's a great idea. You should try it out. Do you feel like it's trying it out? Or do you feel like, no, 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 that's a pretty significant commitment blending your lives? Both are completely valid ways of thinking. But what do you think? Where do your ideas come from? And then the last thing, I'm going to give you kind of, if you have not looked at the discussion board and written your pro and con list for cohabitation, can you pause me, please? Like pause me. I'm trusting you again. And like go write it. It's only 5 things, 5 pros and 5 cons. So go write it. Pause me. Okay, I'm back. You paused me, right? I mean, assuming if you've already written your list, you're good. But if you haven't, don't, don't, don't listen to me and then go write it because I'll ruin it for you. Okay, promise? Promise. Okay. The interesting thing that I've always seen with writing the pro and con list, because I will have groups do this in on campus classes, is the pros are the cons. So go back to your list now and look and see. Are the things that you said, like, you get to spend so much time together? You have to spend so much time together. Like, you get to really know the person you're in a relationship with. You get to know all their annoying habits. Like, it's kind of weird how the pros are the cons. But, like, I guess, being honest and having the tough conversations. Laura Kipnis kind of challenging that you can't do anything in a relationship. And where are the moments of ongoing friction? What are kind of the norms in society that we feel like we kind of have to adhere to in relation to relationships? Because we don't. Oh, please don't ever think just because we're kind of walking through some traditional steps of relationships for many people doesn't mean you get to decide. Your decision's awesome. But being honest with yourself, being reflective with yourself. What have you witnessed in relation to other relationships that you're like, that totally works or that doesn't? So, last thing, we're going to be, like I said, watching a little clip from When Harry Met Sally. And as I described in the discussion board, Harry basically has just run into his ex-wife who had left him, and he's really upset. But he's on his way when he ran into her to help friends. Jess and Marie, it's very good friends. They've fallen in love and they're moving in together. And so Jess and Marie are kind of lovingly bickering over this wagon wheel coffee table that Jess has. And Marie's like, that's hideous. That's not staying in here. And so Harry watches them kind of, just gently go like, oh, no, that's not really a great choice for our style, that kind of stuff. And he blows it apart. And he's like, I'm paraphrasing terribly. I'm like, basically, this relationship's going to be destroyed. Plan ahead now, as he says, put your names in your books, like save yourselves, you're screwed, kind of thing. And so I want to challenge you to this idea. I'm going to ask you in the discussion board, you'll see it if you haven't done it already. But you did pause me and you wrote your pro and con list before you. I don't know. Like, I feel like if we put our names in our books, I don't know. If we really had things like prenuptial agreements were a required part of marriage, that you had to negotiate all of this stuff. I wonder if we, as we fell in love and took these kind of societally normative steps in a relationship, if we were cognizant and acknowledged the fact that the relationship could end, I wonder if that would ultimately help us have stronger relationships. It's kind of backwards thinking, right? That if you were willing to have the tough conversations that sometimes don't happen and can lead to a relationship ending. It's like if you did, it was, matter of fact that you put your names in your books because this relationship could end. You have, the negotiating kind of tentative, non-legal co-residential union kind of technical conversations that aren't romantic and aren't about love. I wonder if ultimately by having those things that we kind of avoid, because if I were to ask students, do you think you should have a prenup? Some are like, heck yeah. And some are like, oh, well, I mean, it's not a good idea to act like a relationship's going to end before it, even gets started. Both are totally valid points. But what works for you? I think it's kind of an interesting thing to consider that if we were more proactive, if we were more committed to kind of looking at I don't even know, deep, dark, worrisome, tricky stuff in relationships, how much better off might we be for it?